All right, ready to dive deep. Today's question, it's a big one. It's kept philosophers busy for, well, forever, basically. What is justice?
Yeah, a classic.
But here's the real head scratcher. Can we actually measure it, like put it on a scale? We're using John Rawls' A Theory of Justice as our kind of our map here.
Dense book.
Oh, for sure. It's brilliant, but dense. Thankfully, we've got an expert to help us break it down.
Rawls, he sets the standard. Feeling about justice. I mean.
Absolutely. And he starts by, well, he kind of takes on utilitarianism.
Right.
That whole idea of like the most just society is the one where everyone's happy, or at least the most people are happy. Greatest good for the greatest number, as they say.
Yeah, classic utilitarianism. But Rawls, he says, there's a problem there, a big one.
Okay, so what's wrong with everyone being happy?
Well, imagine, right, a society, and there's this small group. They're just living their lives peacefully, according to their beliefs. But those beliefs, they're not popular. Most people don't like them. Rawls uses this example to kind of highlight the flaw, the problem in utilitarianism. It could end up justifying squashing that minority group, even if they're not hurting anyone, just to make the majority happy.
So you're saying just because their beliefs aren't popular, that's not real justice, is it? Silencing folks just because, I don't know, they're a little different.
Exactly. Rawls, he's worried about that. Tyranny of the majority, he calls it. He thinks a just society, a truly just society, has to protect those individual liberties, even if they're, a bit inconvenient.
Yeah.
Or unpopular.
Okay, so how do we build that kind of society then, the Rawlsian utopia?
He gives us an alternative. Justice is fairness. To get there, he uses this wild thought experiment, the original position.
Ah, yes. It's like you're designing a society from scratch, but you have no idea, like, who you'll be in it.
Right, like you're behind this veil of ignorance.
It's a cosmic lottery. You could be born rich, poor, talented, part of the majority, the minority, anything.
And Rawls says, in those conditions, you'd design a society based on fairness. Because you wouldn't want to risk ending up in a bad spot, right?
It's like playing it safe.
Right.
But for an entire society.
Exactly. And Rawls, he says, from this original position we'd all agree on two core principles. The first is pretty simple, equal basic liberties for everyone. So freedom of speech, freedom of religion, all the essentials.
Makes sense. You can't have a just society if people can't even speak their minds.
Right.
Or live how they want to. What about the second principle?
Okay, so this one's a bit more nuanced. It's about social and economic inequalities. Rawls, he's not saying everyone has to be perfectly equal, have the same amount of everything. He knows some inequality, it's inevitable. But any inequality that does exist, it has to benefit the least advantaged folks in society, the people at the very bottom. It's called the difference principle.
So it's not about everyone having the exact same amount of money, but making sure that any differences, well, they're actually helping the folks who are struggling.
Yeah, like a rising tide lifts all boats.
Say, love that analogy.
Sure.
But how do we even decide who the least advantaged are? That seems kind of, I don't know, subjective.
Right. Rawls, he says, to use primary goods to measure and compare people's situations. So basic rights, opportunities, income, wealth, all that stuff you need to actually live a decent life.
Was it not just who feels the most disadvantaged, but who actually lacks access to those basic fundamental things?
Right. It's about creating a level playing field. So everyone has a fair shot, no matter what their circumstances are or where they started in life.
Okay, I'm starting to get this justice as fairness thing. It's a real shift, from just focusing on like overall happiness to building a system that protects those individual liberties and make sure any inequalities, well, they're actually helping those who need it most.
And we're just getting started. This is just the foundation, this whole new way of thinking about, well, what justice even means, how we can achieve it.
It's definitely got me thinking. But, okay, here's the million-dollar question. Can we really measure justice? It still feels so subjective, so fuzzy.
That's what we're going to tackle next.
Oh, I can't wait. Stick around, deep divers. We're going even deeper into the heart of Rawlsy justice. Okay, so back to this million-dollar question. Can we really measure justice? I mean, it feels so slippery, What's fair to one person might seem totally off to someone else.
Yeah, it's a question it's been around forever, pretty much. Can we move past, those gut feelings and find like a real objective standard for justice?
Rawls, he seems to think at least we can get closer. to that objective standard. I mean,
Remember that thought experiment, the original position?
yeah, the veil of ignorance, right?
Right. Rawls argues that if we were actually building a society from scratch, without knowing where we'd land, we choose principles that make sure everyone's treated fairly. It's self-interest in a way, but it leads to justice.
Because you could end up anywhere in that society.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to risk being on the receiving end of unfairness.
Exactly. So those principles, the ones we'd agree on in the original position, like those equal basic liberties, the difference principle, those become the measuring stick for justice in the real world.
It's like having, I don't know, blueprints for a just society.
And then we can use those blueprints to kind of check how are real world societies doing? Are they upholding those liberties? Are they, structuring those inequalities in a way that helps the least advantaged?
It's like a justice checklist almost. But even with those principles, measuring something as, I don't know, as big and complex as justice, it can't be easy.
It's definitely not simple, but Rawls, he gives us some tools to make it less subjective, less, remember those primary goods we talked about, those tangible things, education, healthcare, a living wage.
Right, the stuff you actually need to live a decent life.
Yeah.
And those things, we can measure those, can't we?
Exactly. By looking at how those primary goods are distributed in a society, we can get a sense of how just or unjust things really are. If a tiny group is hoarding all the wealth and opportunities while a bunch of other people are struggling to just, meet their basic needs, that's a pretty clear sign. Things aren't balanced fairly.
It's like, I don't know, taking a snapshot of the whole society and seeing, do those essential resources, do they line up with those principles of justice as fairness?
It's not a perfect measure, but it's a more objective starting point than just, relying on our feelings or our biases. It helps us move from, I don't know, this feels unfair to here's why the system is producing unjust outcomes.
Yeah.
Based on, these agreed upon principles.
Okay, so Rawls is saying even though we can't perfectly measure justice, we can get a much clearer picture by using this framework, this Rawlsian way of looking at things. But there's this piece, I'm still wondering about it. His focus, it seems to be on the big picture, the structure of society. But what about individual actions? Like, what about how we treat each other day to day? Does justice has fairness? Does it have anything to say about that?
That's a great question. And Rawls, he does address it. He talks about these natural duties, these moral obligations that we have to each other, just because we're all human.
And so it's not just about setting up the right systems. It's about actually cultivating a sense of justice in individuals.
Rawls would say you need both. You need those just institutions, and you need people who are committed to acting justly in their own lives.
Okay, so what are these natural duties then? What do they look like?
Think back to that original position, the veil of ignorance. If you didn't know, who you'd be in a society, wouldn't you want everyone to be treated with respect, with dignity?
Absolutely. You'd want to create a world where even the most vulnerable people, they were protected.
Exactly. So these natural duties, they include things like, helping people who need help, not harming others, supporting those just institutions. It's about recognizing that everyone has worth, no matter what their circumstances are.
So even if a law is unjust, we have a moral obligation to resist it.
Rawls would say, yeah, we have a duty to uphold those principles of justice, even if it means challenging laws or practices that aren't just. He even gives us this framework for civil disobedience as a way to hold society accountable to those principles.
It's like he's saying, being just, it's not passive. It's not enough to just hope for a fair system. We have to actually participate in creating it through the institutions we build and the choices we make every day.
And that's where it gets really interesting. How do we actually apply these principles, justice as fairness, in our own lives? What does it even look like to be a just person in a world that isn't always just?
Those are questions we're going to explore as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of John Rawls and the pursuit of justice. Stay with us. Okay, so we've really gone deep here with John Rawls and his justice as fairness, all those thought experiments, and even trying to figure out if we can measure justice, put a number on it. But as we wrap this up, I keep coming back to that first question, what even is justice?
Yeah, it's the big one, isn't it? That question that's been around, well, probably as long as humans have, from, those ancient philosophers to folks out there protesting today. Everyone wants a just world.
And it feels like Rawls, he gives us a way to think about it, a framework, It's not about everyone being perfectly equal, but creating a system where everyone's got a real chance to thrive, no matter where they started.
He moves us away from just, maximizing happiness, which, as we talked about, can lead to some sticky situations.
Yeah.
Ethically, I mean. He puts those individual liberties front and center, make sure they're protected, even if a majority doesn't like it.
Right. It's about building a system that's fair at its core, even if it means some people end up with more, but that more, it has to benefit those who are at the bottom. That's the whole point of the difference principle.
It's about, leveling the playing field, giving everyone a fair shot, regardless of, where they started in life. Imagine a society where, I don't know, your chances, they're not determined by luck, by the family you're born into, but by your own effort, your talents. That's Rawls' vision.
Powerful stuff. But can we actually get there? Can we take these big ideas and make them real?
That's the real challenge, right? Rawls, he gives us the plans, the blueprints, but we got to do the building, and it takes a real shift in how we think. We got to commit to fairness in our institutions, our laws, but also in our own actions every day.
So it's not just about passing laws. It's about, I don't know, each of us actually being just.
Right.
Asking ourselves, am I being fair? Am I doing my part to make a world where everyone has a chance?
It's about realizing that justice, it's not like a finish line you cross. It's a journey, a constant process of trying to create a more equal, a more just world.
So as we come out in this deep dive into Rawls and to justice and fairness, I think we're left with a challenge, really, to take those ideas and actually live them in our own lives, the choices we make, how we interact with the world,
Yeah, because in the end, justice isn't something that just, appears. It's something we build together, bit by bit, through what we do, the choices we make, and never giving up on that idea of a fairer world for everyone.
That's Rawls' legacy, isn't it? The challenge he leaves us with. It's a good one worth taking on, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Trying to create a more just world, it's always a journey worth taking, even if there's not, a clear end point.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive, but the conversation, it doesn't have to end here. Keep thinking about these questions about justice. Keep challenging yourselves and keep working toward that world. The one that reflects those ideas, those principles of fairness we've been talking about today. Until next time, deep divers.